in the waiting room at the moment, so welcome everybody to the afternoon session. I'll give it another minute or so to allow others to join.
Kieran's on. Anybody speaking? He's just welcomed everybody and said he would wait a few minutes just for any more.
Looks as though Peter's having trouble joining. I've admitted him a couple of times. Okay, let's kick off. Welcome everybody to the afternoon session. For those of you this morning, you know I'm Sean Riches. Even though Phil's got Sean Riches on his name at the moment, it's because he had to use my link to get in this afternoon. So it's all right, we've done it the other way around. I've been Phil a couple of times in meetings as well, so it works both ways. Just to let you know that we are recording the session, and for those that are unable to join, the link to the recording will be circulated to attendees and will also to all affiliated brief societies on Monday. So anybody that's not been able to join us will get access. So this afternoon session, we have 4 speakers, starting off with Phil, who will give an update on policy issues around trade, zootechnics, and other areas post-Brexit. Followed by Alison Braddock from SRUC, who will talk about the Premier Sheep and Goat Health Schemes. And then we'll move on to the duo of Marcus Bates and Rob Grinnal, who will talk a bit about export certification. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Phil and ask him to kick off this afternoon session.
Good. Thanks very much, Sean, and nice to see you all. I can see some of you. There's some that I can't see names, but yeah, sorry again that this is via Zoom, but I think it's going to be a feature of the future as well, really. But it's nice to be in contact with you all anyway. And as Sean said, I'm going to give a bit of an overview, maybe a policy overview and an overview of where we are in terms of trade and policies affecting trade as well. I'll talk a little bit about the agricultural transition plan and future farming schemes. I guess collectively between myself, Alison, Marcus, and Rob, we're all really talking about the future trading situation that we're facing in this next era of agriculture, really. And I don't think there's any doubt at all that we're facing change. You know, we've known that for a long time, but our departure from the European Union has meant that our government can take a much more central direction, I guess, a much more UK focused direction about where agriculture, food production, land management and environmental management goes in the future. And you know, you'll all be fully aware that we left the European Union at the end of 2020, and here we are in early May, I guess, you know, 4 months in, and still a lot of things to settle down at the moment. There's still an awful lot of unknowns, and I don't think we should expect that what we're seeing today is going to be the status quo forever. But in terms of meat trade in the European Union since our departure, again, you'll remember that prior to our departure from the EU, there was a great deal of worry and concern about leaving with no deal. And if that had happened, we'd have seen tariffs applied on our sheep meat going into into Europe, and we all know what impact that would have had on our market. Fortunately, very much at the last moment, I think it was the 24th of December, a deal was actually struck, and that meant that we did leave the European Union with a deal, which in theory allows us free access for trade between the European Union and the UK, and that I think that helped the situation enormously, because I think a lot of people were really prepared for a pretty devastating situation, to be honest. We sold a lot of lambs early. We'd done an awful lot of promotion and marketing. Our levy bodies had marketed and promoted heavily. Red Tractor, as our English farm assurance scheme, main English farm assurance scheme, I guess, had planned some television advertising as well. So that has all left us to led us into a situation, along with the fact that because of the uncertainty of the whole market, I think the New Zealanders stayed well out of the UK market in terms of bringing lamb in. It's all led us to a situation where the supply and demand balance or dynamics have led to sheep prices being stronger than they probably ever have been, to be honest. I mean, lamb prices at the moment are exceptional. Coal prices are still exceptional as well. So we've got a very fortunate situation at the moment. Most of that, I think, is coming about because of demand here on our domestic market, and again, a low volume of imported lamb coming into the UK. But trade is still going on with the European Union. The first few weeks of 2021 saw some real disruption with export health certificates and stoppages at border control posts. Incorrect paperwork meaning that loads were being sent back. There was some real problems in those first few weeks. I think things have settled down now, but even so, the additional paperwork and export health certification work that's needed to be done, the processors are saying it is adding. I've heard figures of £1,800 a load. It's adding in terms of cost to each load of lamb that's going over to the European Union. And I've also heard figures of up to £4,000. So it's costing somewhere between £1,800 and £4,000 additional for every load that's being exported, at a time when our processors are paying a lot for our lamb as well. And that's good for us. It's good all round, I think. I think high values are a really good thing and a positive thing, but some of those exporting processors at the moment are really feeling the pinch. There's no doubt about that. I think we're starting to see some of our supermarkets having no choice but to use lamb as a loss leader on some of our shelves. And if you look at some of the prices that lamb is selling at in supermarkets and the prices being sold, the farm gate prices, there's definitely some discounting going on at the moment. How long this can last for, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see, really. So along with our exit from the European Union, we were all aware that the government had big ambitions, still got big ambitions to put an end to live exports, and it wasn't long into 2021 that we saw the consultation on the banning of live exports and welfare and transport. That consultation period ended, I think it was in the middle or the end of March. It's still, the results are still being analysed. That looks likely. It was in the government's manifesto that they wanted to ban live exports for slaughter and for further finishing. And it does look like, from what I hear at the moment, that everyone is in agreement that any such ban wouldn't affect breeding animals. So there's still an intention that breeding animals will be sold live from the UK into the EU. But it's not as straightforward as that, because they need to go through a border control post with live animal facilities. And most of you will be aware that we still haven't got that sort of facility available to us. We have, in terms of, they need to go through a BCP with live animal facilities on the place of entry into a country. So in terms of stock coming into the UK, that's still happening. And AFA has agreed to do those inspections now at the point of destination on farm without our border control post needing a live animal facility. There's still plans in place for those to be established, but now we've got an extension until March 2022 anyway. But that flow of animals coming into the UK is still happening. The flow of animals out of the UK into mainland Europe has stopped entirely because there are no ports with live animal facilities at the moment. There's been quite a lot of work. The NFU We've been working closely with them, and a whole range of other livestock organisations have been working to try to assist that. You'll have seen a bit of a plea that we put out a few weeks ago for letters of support related to a company called Quadrilla, who have got staging facilities just outside of Cherbourg, but are also now planning on establishing a site 3 kilometres outside of Calais, which would again re-establish that very established route of Dover to Calais using P&O, and P&O is still keen to continue taking animals on that route as well. So we're hoping that there will be a facility to allow us to export breeding sheep. I guess you could say we've got away with it over these few months because the numbers of breeding sheep being exported over that time of the year is always fairly low. But as these months go by, I know many of you will have interest from European customers, and until that facility is in place, then we can't. No one can move anything unless it's flown out, and I think that's didn't seem to be any practical examples of that really. One thing I would say about that is that although this company Quadrilla they found a site, they got permission for it to be established there. They're investing money into buying the site or renting the site. I'm not sure what it is really, but they are still looking for UK industry or British industry to invest financially in that site as well. It's still got to be fitted out, so it needs penning and gates and loading facilities and the like. And they are looking for 200,000 euros at the moment from British businesses or exporters as an investment in that site. And obviously there would need to be some sort of payback. The payback on the table at the moment is reduced gate fees. So again, that shows you, it just suggests that even when this trade does re-establish, there will be a cost to it. It won't be as free and cheap as it was previously. What impact that will have on commercial sheep that were going over, and there were a number of commercial...
when I was at my lunch.
Right, that's better. There were a number of commercial sheep that were going over, mules and Romneys and commercial clins and the like, but and a small number of much higher value pedigree sheep. And how that additional cost will affect those movements in the future, we're just going to have to wait and see, really. But if anyone's got a keen interest in that and wants to look at investing in return for reduced cost access into that market in the future, do get in touch with me afterwards, please. I'm not expecting a flood of you, but if anyone does want to invest, then come and let me know. Marcus, I think, is going to talk about wider trade agreements going elsewhere, so I'm not going to touch on that at all. But I will just mention the situation with Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland protocols. And again, you'll all be aware that that's led to some really immediate problems for sheep being moved between GB and Northern Ireland, and coming the other way as well from Northern Ireland back into GB. But immediately overnight, we saw the application of scrapie requirements. We are now a third country, and it's important to recognise that Northern Ireland is now within the EU regulatory zone. So any movements that we make to Northern Ireland are no different at all to the movements we would make to mainland Europe. So the requirements are exactly the same. So overnight, we saw the introduction of the scrapie requirements. That means that sheep either have to be an established part of the scrapie monitoring scheme. That my understanding is that it takes 3 years to get through that scheme to sufficient to be able to export sheep, or they need to be genotyped. That's the other way that they can get through to Northern Ireland. So there was the introduction of those new scrapie requirements immediately, and then the other problem we've got there is residency periods with any stock coming from Northern Ireland back to GB. So for years and years, the Northern Ireland livestock industry is completely integrated within the United Kingdom. Breeders would have been moving stock to and fro. From now on, if Northern Ireland breeders bring any stock back for shows and sales, if they're not sold and end up in a home in in GB, if they need to go back, then there's a requirement for a 60-day residency period before they can go back. So that will cause some real problems, and it's putting some real nervousness into the those Northern Irish farmers who are selling breeding stock as well. So there's a problem with that. And then the other issue with the Northern Ireland protocols is the tagging requirements. I mean, I see that more as a nuisance factor and potentially a risk to traceability as well. But it's not going to stop any movements. But there's nothing that us as breeders in GB have got to do either. This is more about the tags being changed when they get to Northern Ireland. They need to be fitted with an NI tag. So the Northern Ireland situation is a real problem, and there's very little that's moving between GB and Northern Ireland at the moment. I've been working very closely with Aileen over the last few months about the fact that there were a number of blackface ewe lambs that had been purchased in the autumn sales. They were being kept on grass keep here over the winter to get to the age when they could be MV tested to be moved over there, and then they were caught up in these restrictions of then not being able to move because they weren't part of a scraping monitoring scheme or a genotyping scheme. And I think probably a lot of those farmers now had found solutions. I think there was somewhere in the region of 30 to 35 farmers in Northern Ireland that were affected by that. Fortunately, the way that sheep prices are at the moment, I know some of those sheep have been moved on, and there's been no negative financial impact. But we're working very hard on that issue at the moment. We're meeting on a regular basis with DERA. We have got a letter in with the Secretary of State at the moment requesting a meeting to get it resolved. And we were made aware yesterday that there was a meeting taking place yesterday between the UK and the EU Commission where these issues started to come up again. And with the signing off of the TCA last week, it does seem that the mood between the UK government and the EU Commission is a little bit more positive now, and amenable, and maybe in a place where there can be some constructive negotiations taking place. TCA, sorry, is the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which was just signed off late last week. Again, you'll all be aware, a lot of you were part of the webinar that we laid on a couple of months ago around the zootechnics regulations and the impact that has on you as breed societies in terms of being able to include members from outside of the UK. To be honest, a lot of you will be far more au fait with where we are now than I am. You know, we're clear what the situation is. I'm pretty sure that various breed societies have taken or looked at different options. I know some of whether they've done it already, but I know some have looked at dropping their zootechnics registration entirely. It's just not worth it. Some are in the process of setting up arrangements in Southern Ireland, and some are looking at working together collaboratively on maybe linking forces. But to be honest, you know, I don't really know a great deal of the detail behind what's going on there. So moving on a little bit to domestic policy and the agricultural transition plan, and I'm very aware here that I'm talking about a lot of work that's going on in England, some of it being worked on a UK scale, I guess. But I think I'm seeing across all of our four nations that there is a fairly common vision for the future, even if it's at different speeds and scales. You know, the overall ambition of trying to encourage agriculture to be more productive and able to survive without financial support is something that I think all of our administrations share. Maybe less so in Scotland, but in the other three nations, there would be a common view there, really. So to what extent can agriculture be incentivized and encouraged to be more efficient, productive, so that it's less reliant on financial support, at the same time as trying to tackle, again, very commonly shared environmental issues. And those environmental issues would include both carbon and climate change, and also nature recovery and the protection of natural capital or natural resources, water, air, soil and the like. So, even though I'm talking a little bit much more about England and English policy, it will in time, I think, have a big influence on policy and direction in all of our nations. Notwithstanding, I can see Alex smiling a little bit grimly there, but notwithstanding it, we we don't know where we're going to go with some of the future governance of our devolved nations as well. But notwithstanding that, you can see a common theme, even though there's going to be different timescales, I guess. But just to read a paragraph out from the Agricultural Transition Plan, by 2028, so at least we've got a transition. That's a good thing. From 2021 to 2028, there's no cliff edge, if you like, but we're looking for a renewed agricultural sector, producing healthy food for home and for export, from profitable farms that are economically sustainable without subsidy, with farming and the countryside contributing significantly to environmental goals and addressing climate change. And it's good. I mean, probably all of us would want to be in that position. None of us want to be reliant on subsidies and financial support, and we all want to be rewarded for what we do. So the aspiration is good. The challenge is going to be achieving that, I think. One of the things that was really clear in the Agricultural Transition Plan was that it was absent of a lot of detail. The only real detail that came through was the scale of reduction of the basic payment scheme. And it did cause a lot of frustration in that we knew how much our money coming to agriculture was going to be cut. What we didn't know was whether the budget would be retained and in what form it might come in the future. And there is still some frustration about that. Things are starting to become a little bit clear now, I guess. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a second, but the other thing that runs alongside this is compliance. And there is, with the changing all these schemes, I think all of our national administrations are looking at ways to I suppose, improve cross-compliance penalties. We've all had examples where cross-compliance penalties has just been applied through fairly minor breaches of EU rules and regulations. And I think everyone is now talking about a more proportionate approach of advisory notices if things aren't being done according to plan, and followed by enforcement notices if little action is being taken, followed by financial action or legal action if things are that bad. So again, it's really, that's got to be a welcome approach, I think. We're also starting to see new suites of grants coming through to support productivity and at the same time environmental protection. I think it's probably unlikely that we'll see grants that support productivity without there being an environmental or an animal welfare related link. But again, I don't think that should be too challenging. I think it's quite easy. Most of the things we want to invest in and do, will do both those things. They'll help productivity, but they'll also lead to environmental improvements one way or another. I've got no doubt about that. So where are we? Well, in 2001 now, in the spring, we saw the launch of the expressions of interest for the Sustainable Farming Incentive in England only. DEFRA received, I think it was somewhere in a region of 2,400 expressions of interest. They're going to tease that down to a lower number, and then they're going to invite applications from a representative number of farms across England. Those farms will be invited to take part in a pilot. Now, they are going to be signing up to a scheme with scheme requirements, but I think it's really important for everyone to recognise that really what they're signing is important for DEFRA to understand this too, that what those farmers are doing is signing up to a pilot where there's going to be an awful lot of learning going on for 3 years. Farmers are even going to be being paid for a learning element of so many hours a week, whereby both the farmers learn, but also DEFRA learn from the farmers' experiences as well. So there'll be a 3-year sustainable farming incentive pilot that starts later this year. Then there's going to be a rollout of an element of sustainable farming incentive in 2022, but that won't be the whole package. That will be just probably a couple of standards that they're talking about within this pilot phase. And the intention is that then will run alongside countryside stewardship, and slowly over the next 4 years, the the activities and the funding will change from stewardship across to ELMS, to sustainable farming incentive. So I think we're going to see a long transition. I don't think that transition will be complete by 2024. I think it'll go beyond there. And the aspiration is it will be a finalised scheme by 2027/2028. So the sustainable farming incentive has really emerged from the tier 1 of ELMS. There's always been talked about there being 3 tiers within ELMS. One now becoming the SFI. Tier 2 is local nature recovery. So that might well be where farmers work together on a water catchment project, trying to achieve maybe local or regional biodiversity action plan measures, those sorts of things. And then the 3rd tier will be landscape recovery. So you've got sustainable farming incentive, local nature recovery, and landscape recovery. And the landscape recovery is the one I think where it's still going to be quite a battleground, I think, in terms of that's where the pressure will come from large scale land use change. It will be the rewilding projects, it'll be afforestation, large scale peatland restoration, those sorts of things. There will be opportunities in there for farmers, but it will certainly challenge some of the things that sheep farmers do. There's a real positive in there that we've ended up, and it was late last year that we managed to achieve this, but that tier 1 of ELMS being called the sustainable farming incentive. Never before was there ever any suggestion that farming would be a word used within the new environmental schemes. So I would see it as a real positive that we're talking about a scheme that supports sustainable farming. And again, that's probably something that we'd all applaud and want to be part of, I guess. Alongside all of that, there will be exit schemes for people to move out of the industry, if they so choose, and new entrant schemes as well. DEFRA have got this, I think is a little bit misguided, to be honest, but they've got this view that the industry is being hampered by an older generation of not very progressive farmers, and if we sweep them out of the way and bring in a lot of young enthusiastic people, our levels of productivity will rise. But I think we would probably all know that our industry is not structured in that way. It's not that straightforward. And even youngsters coming in the industry don't take long before they learn that they need to get a reasonable work-life balance, and their aspirations and their interests in life change over the years anyway. So, I don't know, but there will be exit schemes and new entrant schemes. And the other thing that we will see in 2022 is the introduction of the first phase of Pathway, which is an animal health and welfare scheme in England. And I think we'll find ways of connecting that very closely to the sustainable farming incentive, and that will support a number of measures to try to improve the health status of our livestock, sheep and other livestock species, and it will pay for, in time, it will pay for and incentivize higher welfare actions as well. I think it's likely to start in 2022 with financially supporting a veterinary visit on any farm that wants to be part of the Pathway programme, really, with that veterinary visit then capturing a few key health KPIs, and then over a period of time focusing on 2 or 3 main health and welfare issues. And the ones on the table at the moment are lameness, anthelmintic resistance, and a collection of antibiotic use data as well to a central medicine hub. So those are the things that's likely to focus on in the future. So I think I'll leave it there, actually. And again, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. I don't want to take too much time. I probably have already, and I apologize for that. But just to say that the future, to me, it looks like we're moving into a world where we're going to see higher standards. We're going to see an expectation of high quality, and that high quality will relate to the product that we're producing, whether that's meat for the table or whether it's breeding stock. That's going to be, we're looking at high quality, but we're also looking at quality in terms of the other outcomes of our farms, the environmental footprint, the carbon footprint, and the general protection of the planet. You know, that's where we're heading. We've got to find a way of making sure that stacks up financially, of course, but our farming is going to be moving towards a system which is climate friendly, protecting natural capital and recovering nature at the same time. We all know that we think we do, and we want to contribute to that already in what we do. And I think we need to make the case for the value of what we're doing, alongside also accepting that we probably need to go further in some areas. We're going to see greater levels of efficiency encouraged, and farmers adding value wherever they can. We're going to see rewards for public goods. We're going to see incentives for investments and resilience to an extent where the government do not want to support our farming enterprises. I still believe longer term that we're in a position that we can make a case for, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to maintain our sheep numbers in the UK. I think there will be pressure in some of our areas, and you can see pressure coming in our uplands. It's been there for a long time, but I think that I still think that farming in the uplands has got a really strong and attractive and good future, but I also see there's a lot of expansion for the integration back into the lowlands as well. That whole approach of reintroduction of grass lays and the use of sheep and in some of those grass breaks, and maybe moving more back towards a slightly different, but you know, the stratified sheep system where there was a long-standing connection between the uplands and lowlands. But in a way, you know, that model, what comes out of that is down to us. You know, it's for us to devise a model of farming that delivers the objectives that or the challenges that the policymakers are putting in front of us, I think. So if I can, I'll leave it there and hand over to, well, I'll ask for questions, Sean, if you want any points of clarification, and then over to Alison.
No actual questions. A couple of points put in the chat. Edward just clarified that the residency period for Northern Ireland is 6 months, not 60 days for Northern Ireland sheep returning to Northern Ireland.
I'm sorry if I said 60 days. I'm sorry. Absolutely, it's 6 months. Yes. Yeah.
Blue-faced Leicester breeders have members in Southern who register in our flock. Can anyone give a definitive answer if they are still allowed to do this? Or do they have to set up their own blue-faced Leicester Sheep Society in Southern Ireland and come out of our flock book?
Well, again, there may be someone else here that knows more than I do, but my understanding is that they can't remain in your flock book. They have to have their own flock book now.
Yeah, but the blue-faced Leicesters aren't zootech registered, are you?
Ah, okay. Well, that's different. If they're not zootech, yeah, if they're not zootech registered, then I don't think there's any reason why they can't, but the challenge would be, and it probably isn't an issue for you, but they won't be zootech registered for trade back into Europe. So you could keep, if you're not zootech registered, you can keep them in your flock book, but selling any stock into Europe from breeders that are registered in your flock book, they wouldn't be registered within other European nations.
But it all depends how the people on the other side read the rules. So it might not make any difference. We don't know. So Helen, you look confused, but
I do. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So does this mean that our Southern Ireland members can stay within our flock book? Is that correct? I just need a yes or a no. Kieran McGrath is in. He's our Southern Ireland club secretary, so he needs an answer as well, because if they've got to start to set up their own association in Southern Ireland, he needs to get on with it now, really.
Could I come in here?
You're not...
Yeah, Marcus, come on.
You're right to point out this is all about zootechnic legislation. The zootech legislation says that you can't have, we can't extend, our breeding programs into European countries, which we used to be able to do before as a member state. So if Europe came to audit our zootech registered breed societies and they found that we were registering sheep from Northern Ireland, and that would be basically extending the breeding program to Southern Ireland, then we would be in trouble. And that's why DEFRA is saying we can't afford to do that, because there are lots of other breed societies registered under zootech that need the zootech access to Europe for substantial amounts of international trade. So that is the case, I'm afraid. They've been very hard-headed about this. They won't allow us to do it. So you can't, if you want to be zootech registered, you can't have Southern Ireland sheep born after or registered after the 1st of January in your flock book. And then there's the debate about whether you want to be zootech registered or not. But at the moment, that's the only legislative game in town. So the only way that government can recognise breed societies as being official is through that legislation. There could well be an argument that we should change that legislation in the future, but at the moment, that's the only thing we've got. So, for example, if somebody else decided they wanted to set up a rival organisation, there'd be nothing to stop them doing it. Whereas if you're zootech registered, government will say, no, sorry, we've already got an organisation that does blue-faced Leicester, so you can't have two.
And how would that affect those breeders in Southern Ireland then, Marcus? I mean, presumably they would have to go through all the normal controls in terms of moving sheep between Ireland and GB, but they wouldn't be recognised in the rest of Europe as being part of a breeding programme, would they?
No, they'd have to set up their own breeding programme. I mean, for example, one of the things that you might end up with, and this is purely speculative, so I know this is being recorded, so I want to make very clear this is just an example. But with exports of breeding stock, how would you prove that they are breeding animals? And one simple answer for government is to say, well, they have to have a zootech pedigree certificate. So then if you wanted, so it wouldn't be just about recognition at the other end. Government at this end might want to use that in the same way that P&O require some sort of confirmation that the animals are breeding stock to allow them on the ferry. Government might require this to be sure that actually they're breeding animals. And I say that's just an idea to give you an example of, it's not just as simple as saying, well, who needs zootech? Let's throw it away. It's frustrating that we're in this situation, and it's very bad much worse for the sheep sector than it is for the pig sector, for example. But
Marcus, Karina's question as well. The answer to that is yes, isn't it? They can't remain in our flock book.
I'm afraid that, yeah, the answer is yes. If you're a zootech registered, you can't have EU animals in your flock book after the 1st of January. You don't have to take out the animals that were already there, but you can't put any new ones in.
And they can't be in a section. Again, I understand it is not a matter of them just being in a separate section. There has to be a registered office, an address, and an administration within the European Union. That's our understanding.
Yes, you'd have to set up an office in Dublin and establish a breed society there.
Bill, can I comment? When we had the last meeting about the zootech regulations, I think the breed societies were running, that was then just the back end of last year. The government official that went through the zootech regulations did say zootech is voluntary. You do not have to be zootech regulated to export to Europe. Okay, so that's one point. Definitely the point about what you were asking about your breeds. If they are in Europe, yeah, definitely you cannot have them in your flock book. That was stated that day as well. But you mentioned about, Marcus, you mentioned about if you were exporting breeding stock. Now remember, there's a lot of crossbreed sheep that are used for breeding. They don't have a registered breed society. So I think we have to be very careful that we start saying you need a zootech certificate to put breeding sheep abroad, because that's actually not the case. So, pardon me, I just wanted to highlight that I hope, I know that you said, okay, this has been recorded and you were just suggesting that, but we can't let that happen. Because if you, mules, North England mules, Scotch mules, any cross, that goes, a lot of Scotch mules go to France and into Europe. They're not registered breeds, so therefore they do not need a zootech certificate. So we have to be very careful we don't push our industry down another line of bureaucracy that we can't adhere to.
You know, I think you're right, Aileen, and Marcus's point is right. You know, someone somewhere, and particularly if we ban the export of animals for further fattening or slaughter as well, someone someday is going to ask the question about where is the proof that these are breeding animals. And in a way, it's an easy answer to fall back and say, well, you know, they need to be registered with a breeding society. But Aileen, you're quite right that we need to guard against that, because numerically, those crossbred breeding sheep would be the big numbers that would go.
Yeah.
It isn't just the crossbreds though. I mean, I'm in a female breed where quite big numbers go across. And although we don't in the normal time, we don't do certificates for females because we're talking of big numbers. I mean, there was 500 went over in one load. That was Northern Ireland last year. But so yeah, we have to be. It's not just the crossbreds; it's the purebreds as well. And we've got to be careful all the way around on this one.
Yeah.
Yes, Heather, I do know that because we're exactly the same with the blackies. So I just was highlighting that you know that is an issue that everyone has to be aware of when you're sitting speaking to government.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's the definition of a breeding sheep. It can't solely rely on a zootech certificate. We have to have a proper definition of a breeding sheep.
No,
Helen,
please don't take this. You know, that was just an example. There's obviously a big debate to be had about the future of zootech legislation, whether it's the right thing for us to have. But one of the issues that was pointed out to us right early in Brexit was that in terms of the legislative calendar, there wouldn't be time for things like zootech legislation to get priority in the first couple of years after we leave the European Union, because there'll be lots of other legislative changes that government will want to make. So we're stuck with it, the legislation that we have now. There's a question in the chat, what's the benefit? I think there's a debate to be had about that, which would lead us into, well, in that case, you know, what should we have in its place? But all I'm saying is that's what we have at the moment. If, for example, we'd finished up with tariffs, then the only way to avoid tariffs on live exports would have been for them to have zootech pedigree certificates. That's how the European system works.
Marcus,
that's a problem. That's a problem for the crossbreds. And yes, there's lots of other issues to be taken into account there.
Marcus, the point from Karina there in chat as well is related to Carol's question above, isn't it? Because we can't register animals born and resident in an EU country, but an animal, if a Charolais society is registered zootechs in, say, France and registered zootechs in Britain, then that is the point, because you can move them back and then they can be included in the flock book.
Yes, if there's a Charolais society in France and you were moving the sheep to France, in order to go into their flock book in France, they ought to have the zootech pedigree certificate. And
that is the whole purpose of being zootech registered. And if you don't do that, then there's probably very little use, unless, you know, we end up with a scenario that we just described where there's some other reliance on the zootech. But it doesn't sound like that's a very desirable. It's not even being discussed as far as I'm aware at the moment. I mean, it's it's one that will come up, but we need to be careful.
Well, sorry, Helen's before me.
Yeah, I'm sorry to go on about this again. So, because we're not zootech registered, our Southern Ireland members could stay in our flock book for this year. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding.
Yes.
Yeah, my understanding
right.
Too.
Okay, thank you. The next question there is then, because we're not zootech registered and neither are our Northern Ireland members or our Southern Ireland members, if our Northern Ireland members come over here and buy a blue-faced Leicester tup and want to take it back to Northern Ireland, would they need some kind of certificate to do that? Or are they not allowed to take it across the water? because we're not zootech registered. Is that a problem for movement?
My understanding is that's not a problem at all. The only restriction is that they can't become part of an EU flock book or any breeding program without there being an equivalent organisation that's registered over there. But commercially, there's no reason why the sheep can't go over, be recognised in your flock book, and then presumably come back to GB as well.
Right, because all of those are in our flock book anyway. Southern Ireland, Northern Ireland are all incorporated in the one flock book. So as far as you can tell, there's no restriction on them.
I don't think so. I don't think so. And as long as you've got, again, my understanding, as long as you've got no aspirations for your breed to be recognised in other countries across Europe, then maybe that's fine for you. You don't need to be zootech registered at all.
We've had one or two inquiries from people in Europe who've said, oh, what are the chances of having a blue-faced Leicester across here? But they've never actually said that they want to put it into a different flock book. As far as I understand, we are the only blue-faced Leicester flock book in the world. I don't know of another one in America or anywhere else.
I mean, I don't think that would. Yeah, I think they would be sold over there as commercial sheep, and that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Lovely. My other issue is about this ear tag situation that you mentioned, Phil, to do with removing all the pedigree data from that animal and putting in a tag from the farmer in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Where does the pedigree registration go?
I know,
when they want to register lambs from that sire, do we register on the bloodline or do we register on the information that's on the tag?
Yeah,
kind of a grey area.
Yeah, it really is a grey area at the moment, and it's being discussed just at the moment between DEFRA and the EU Commission. And apparently there was a note that came out yesterday that said that apparently that the EU have agreed on a solution. Now, what that is at the moment, I don't know. But
so they haven't divulged that yet. No,
they haven't.
Okay.
No,
but you'll release that when you do know, will you?
Yeah,
I assume you'll tell us all.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And there's the two suggestions that have been put forward would have been that you could apply just a simple GB tag. That would be it, so an additional small tag that said GB, or you could replace it with a GB tag that had the same number, so at least the traceability was the same. Maybe the prefix changed, but the number remained the same. That's not been an option to date. The numbers had to change, but it does look like they're very aware of the problem. It looks like they may well have found a bit of a solution, or they're talking about a solution.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And I just one comment that we are a registered breed society with DEFRA. We don't, we shouldn't be, because we don't have a flock book. But interestingly enough, they said that we had to be when they had the scrapie plan. Anyway, that's another story. Even though you are a registered breed society and you can sell with a zootechnical certificate, or your sheep with a zootechnical certificate, my understanding is you don't have to. Okay, so Marcus is right. We have sheep going to well, the ones that go to Germany, they always had to have a pedigree certificate with them because they were put into that flock book in Germany. So that happens a lot of EU countries, but Northern Ireland obviously doesn't happen to. So you don't have to send them on a zootech. You can still be a zootechnical registered breed society or a registered breed society, and you have the option of whether you want to sell them with the certificate, depending on where
Wait on today, he said, if he can get it.
Or without
I'll try and ring him again now. Why, we nearly finished, are
you?
Can you get in a mute, Sean, or not?
I've
muted.
I think I've muted.
Right, okay, that was just my last statement. So, I think there's ways around the rule. We're getting hung up on quite a lot. You don't have to send them the certificate, but the option's there. If the country you're sending them to needs that certificate and you're registered with DEFRA, you can produce the certificate.
Yeah. And in answer to, maybe lastly, in answer to Carol's question there, as long as the society, there is a registered zootechnics registered society in Europe, it doesn't matter which country it comes from within Europe. And if it comes back into into GB, then you can register it. There doesn't need to be a breed society registration in each of the EU countries. It's just, it has to be within Europe. Does that answer?
Yes, it
Carol?
does. Thank you, Phil. Yeah.
Okay. A lot of debate, a lot of questions about that one. I think there is also a case for getting some clarification. So we will update on anything new, as Phil mentioned, as soon as we can do, to keep you all updated on that. I'm going to hand over now to Alison, who's going to talk about the Premier sheep and goat.
Oh, yes, bear with me. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you all see that? Because I can't. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to rattle through this, and do feel free to obviously ask questions at the end. Right, okay. I wanted just to draw your attention to, I forgot to mention COVID-19, but the test extension that we've got for MV accreditation. We did actually send out an extension. I think it was a few months extension, 3 months extension, and we asked people to complete a COVID declaration. So any overdue testing for the routine periodic blood tests for MV accreditation should be done by the end of May 2021. I've just checked with the office, and we think we've got about 130 odd people that fall within that, which is pretty good out of about 4,000 people. What I would say is the date of the subsequent test will remain at the original date, so there will be a bit of a shorter gap than there would have been, but I think hopefully we'll catch up with that. So as usual, any accredited animals moving flocks will require a test 6 months after joining a new flock, and we also recommend a point of purchase test, and this will help, I've got here really, any slight increase in risk caused by the extension. So we're on track, we're getting plenty of testing, and I'm hoping we'll be, you know, we'll be up to date very shortly. Just a really quick reminder, in the past we used to accept, when you did your routine periodic blood test, any other samples. Basically we'd say we'd test for other diseases. Can we ask that we have additional samples alongside those for the MV testing, and also the appropriate diagnostic submission form rather than the Sheep and Goat Health Scheme submission form, because the lab gets in a right mundungus, and that's, you know, where there's a danger of losing samples. So if we could just ask that people do that, please. Just a very quick reminder of the rules. We were asked to remind people at the last Sheep and Goat Health Scheme Advisory Board. We introduced these rules a year or so ago, and the idea is that if you have MV accredited animals and non-MV accredited animals on the same holding, you need to screen 12 non-accredited animals at every routine periodic blood test. I've spoken to St Boswell's, and they seem to be saying that this is running okay. It's actually working very well. And I've just already alluded to the fact that if you're buying in accredited animals, don't forget they need to be tested 6 to 12 months after arrival. And in the past, people who have been on routine periodic blood tests with a long gap of 2 to 3 years sometimes used to forget to test those new animals. So that's why we've been reminding people. In terms of imported animals, semen and embryos, just a reminder that if they come in accredited under a non-UK scheme, they must be kept isolated or not used, implanted until authorization by Sheep and Goat Health Scheme vet. Now, obviously, with all the discussion we've had going on at the moment, I'm not sure there's an awful lot of that, but that's something to bear in mind, that we keep to that in future. I've had a few people coming to me with regard to embryo recipients and questioning whether some of these recipients that are being sold as MV accredited are actually MV accredited. We're just about to publish a newsletter, and in that we've got an article. We ask that people check health status, obviously not to take anything at face value, correct animals, date, owner details on the health status report, and actually ask the questions, you know, get your Breed Society members, have the sheep been born on the vendor's farm, or have they been bought in? If they've been bought in, have they been bought in as MV accredited? Is there documentation? If they're non-accredited, have they had sufficient time to have been through 2 qualifying tests? So they need to be 18 months old before they can be MV accredited. Now, this is, you know, it's important that we do actually look at that, and you know, it's up to the buyer to be buyer beware. And also, we've been talking about tags and all the complication around Brexit, but do these sheep have their original ear tags, and can they trace the records back? You guys know more about ear tagging than I do, and you know that, you know, what can be done to do that tracing. We do ask that people check the membership database on our website. Some people, some members haven't given permission for their animals to be listed. If that is the case and you can't see anything on there, psghs.co.uk, then do give the St Boswell's team a call, and they will be able to help you. Okay. Okay, just letting you know, we've put articles out about a new sheep and goat health schemes monitoring scheme. It's actually monitoring schemes for Mydevisner and Johne's disease. Unlike the accreditation scheme for the Johne's disease, it's a feces test. This is aimed at commercial sheep farmers with large flocks who are put off by the biosecurity requirements. I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago now, we actually launched a monitoring scheme, and we had about 20 members. So this is the attempt to actually launch again. Now that there is much more awareness with regard to welfare and health, and you know, the drive for testing for MV. So it's the idea that there's regular flock screening for these guys. It's obviously not the gold standards, but it is an early warning system to limit disease spread. So yeah, so at the moment we've got large commercial flock in Scotland, all sorts of other flocks, and you know, just as an example, there's a pedigree Shetland flock in Dorset. So we are gradually getting in members for this. It is not a replacement, obviously, for the MV accreditation, you know, for export and accredited sections at shows and sales, but we are trying to broaden the net and trying to increase opportunity for testing in the national flock. So there are 3 groups that are tested. 12 to 20 animals that are high risk, and they will be selected by the vet, and that depends whether you have a flock that's 500 animals or over 500 animals. You test all your rams, and after the first year of becoming a member, you then test a proportion of your added animals as well, unless they're actually from an accredited flock. So the samples are to be taken by the vet surgeon at any time, but obviously at least 6 weeks before the animals are due to be sold, if they are going to be sold. The high risk, as I've explained, animals are selected by a vet, and these would be, you know, thinner animals. They haven't done very well in terms of raising the lambs. Their milk yield is pretty poor, and they're pretty ropey for no apparent reason, you know, like lameness or dental disease. So we also ask there's an annual biosecurity check by vet, and a health plan, which is fairly, you know, it's fairly easy to be able to work through the health plan, and we've actually got that attached to our rules. And then health reports are issued annually, like MV accreditation, and we include the number of years that they are actually monitored. So that was just thought you need to be aware that that's what we're doing. Going on to the scrapie monitoring, we have had a slight delay in updating the rules. I know Dave Wilson has been talking to DEFRA and AFA, and we were hoping that we'd have the new rules out actually before this meeting. However, having looked at the new rules, we're just waiting for them to be approved. There's very little difference between the new rules and the old rules. And I do actually have a scrapie monitoring digital guide that I can send out to everyone, and that has the overview basics of what you need to do with scrapie. I think the people were more interested in how scrapie monitoring affected people at shows and sales. So as I'm assuming you know this, but obviously there are three types of shows or sales. One is dedicated show sale where there's all scrapie monitoring animals. The second is segregated show sale, and there are detailed rules around loading, unloading, land use, show ring, segregation, flooring. And that's very much keeping different health statuses apart. And they are both licensed by AFA. So we don't get involved in those. It's AFA that gets involved in those. The third type of rule is unsegregated. And that is, it can be quite confusing because actually DEFRA stipulate there should be no nose-to-nose contact at these unsegregated show sales. And although in the past, the rules haven't really changed, the new rules will make it much more obvious that DEFRA say they don't want any nose-to-nose contact. And the reason they're saying that is that you have to sign on the export certificate, if you're exporting animals, that there has been no nose-to-nose contact between animals that aren't scrapie monitored and those are, and those between the 3-year and 7-year. So different statuses cannot be penned together. Okay. We still have the window of opportunity May to August or all year if there are only male only events. And the other thing that I would stress is that these movement restrictions do not apply, any of the SMS restrictions, to sheep with export level certification of ARR. Okay, so that's the other thing that I think will, well, I know will come into play is that the discussions around the scrapie genotyping at non-approved labs, some of which allowed owners to sample their own animals. SRUC has consulted with DEFRA, AFA, BVA, SVS, etc., and agreed to concentrate on retesting some male animals. So any male animals remaining in the flock that entered the flock on a non-approved genotype certificate will need to be retested at an export lab, i.e. AFA or SRUC, but this does not apply to homebred animals, and this will probably take place during 2022 during the annual OV inspections. The people that I've spoken to so far seem to suggest that that's not going to be a problem, and there won't be many in that, you know, that come into that. So in terms of scrapie genotyping, and I know that there, you know, we had discussions with people where we're saying, well, you know, the scrapie genotyping can be very expensive. Individuals have sent in multiple samples for batch discounts, and we do have, we are looking at talking to breed societies and getting agreement with SRUC to batch samples if that works for the breed society. For the discounted price. Now, obviously, the breed society, if you're doing that, then you know it's obviously up to individual breed societies. But I know, in speaking to some people, there will be a small admin charge charged by the breed society. And Jill Thompson, who works at Edinburgh, she has been talking to some of the breed societies for this, and we suggest, or Jill has worked out a kind of protocol where the breed society keeps a spreadsheet for us to cross-check with each member's ear tag, breed, sex, and submission form. And the submission form is kept for records. And then the results are available from us within 3 weeks, often sooner. And we have to cross-check results for certification. It's really important that this is really watertight in order for us to do this. So results are sent out by SRUC, and then the Breed Society can send out certificates to his members. And I would stress this is in the early stages, and it was a way of us helping breed societies batch samples, because I know that a lot of you have commented in terms, about the price. No samples, what I say, will be accepted on this minimum price basis unless the individual breed society has set up an agreement with SRUC. So it was, do feel free to speak to us about that if you feel that would work for your society, but that is an option. I just wanted to very quickly say sheepandgoathealth.co.uk, SRUC, a web platform, have updated. We've updated our pages, so we've got a new Sheep and Goat Health Schemes website. Please do visit the website. I'd love to get your feedback. It needs to work for you. It needs to have the information that you need for yourself and your members. We have a health scheme members blog. I'd be delighted for anyone who would like to come forward for case studies. And we've also got the members database on there, I've explained before, advice guides and rules, and all the testing and submission forms that you need. And we've got a fairly good following on Facebook and Twitter, and we've got the online guides for information on the go, basically. So as well as the weighty rules that I know that they're quite a long documents, all our rules, we're trying to have something that you can take on your mobile phone and it's very easy to read. So we've actually got a series of digital brochures that I can send you links to if you feel that would be useful for scrapie, MV, Johne's disease. Yeah, so happy to send those to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alison. So there are no questions that have come up in the chat. Phil's got his hand up.
Just to make a comment in terms of the genotype testing, if there were in a meeting with DEFRA yesterday, it came up that DEFRA could be persuaded to potentially cover the cost of genotype testing under what they call their movement assistance scheme. So this is all about enabling what they call unfettered trade between GB and Northern Ireland, which is a possibility, but they will probably only cover the costs of the testing of the animals that pass and are able to move.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone that had a high level of failure, it's not going to work. But if anyone felt that there was any mileage in that at all, we could have a conversation with DEFRA about whether it could be covered, the cost could be covered under the movement assistance scheme. But I saw, Aileen, you shook your head, and I'm not surprised either by that. But
well, we know that from our scrapie scheme all these years ago, I mean, we're only looking at between 8 and 10% type 1s within the blackface breed. So, your great idea. I was getting quite excited that DEFRA might allow, somebody's got 200 yows to test, but there might only be 5, 10. Don't know, that are ones, so they're only going to get the money for them. Alison, I'll contact you privately after this meeting anyway, but I am still of the opinion that the whole scrapie monitoring scheme needs to be looked at. And you were just saying it's been updated, but I think it's out of date in this day and age. We don't have a scrapie problem in the UK. 16 or 17 sheep it was in 2019, through all the monitoring that's done and all the testing, I had scrapie out of 25 million. So I do think it's something I want to go into discussion with yourselves about looking at this scheme and with DEFRA. I know that's not going to be done in the next 2 or 3 days, but I just wanted to make you all aware that you know, if we think about where we are on a health status and what's happened with BSE, etc., we need to be able to make that scheme simpler. That's really what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying with regard to complicated and trying to make things practical. Unfortunately, we only run the scheme on behalf of DEFRA. DEFRA are obviously, you know, we are doing it for them, and they are driven by the need for export certification. So if EU says that they need to be scrapie monitored, there's not an awful lot we can do about it. So it's at a much higher level than us. But welcome your discussions, Aileen, anyway, afterwards, because, you know. Okay.
Helen Roberts.
Helen?
No, Helen Castman.
Oh, Helen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Hi. Just in Northern Ireland, our Blueface Leicester members have an export sale once a year in September, where everything is either scrapie monitored or genotype 1. This was to enable so that sheep could go across the border into Southern Ireland, and also so that they could sell them to members over here. Would that sale now still need to be an export sale under the change of rules, or any guidance on that, anybody?
As far as I know, the rules from NI to GB and NI to EU, which includes the south of Ireland, have not changed. So the rules would stay the same as far as I know. Maybe Marcus or Rob knows better. That's how I read it.
No, yeah, so do I, Edward, that you still need to have scrapie monitored flocks in Northern Ireland, and have a special sale. Can anybody answer this question actually? Are all the flocks, and we'll take Southern Ireland, we'll just take Southern Ireland as an example, because we're now in a situation with exports. Is every flock in Southern Ireland scrapie monitored?
I don't actually think there is very many scrapie monitored in the south of Ireland, Aileen. There are a few who would in the past have went to GB to sell sheep, and because they were in the south, then they needed to be scrapie monitored. But it's not a big percentage.
I just feel the whole thing doesn't make sense, because if Northern Ireland is now under the same health ruling as Southern Ireland, you don't need to be scrapie monitored to move sheep, because you're all on the one island now. I'm sorry, this whole thing, as you can gather, has infuriated me. The whole carry on with Northern Ireland. I just think there's a whole lot of dumbwits sat there and made this up, and it just doesn't make sense. Sorry, rant over.
Well, I think the authorities see scrapie as something different than maybe MIDI. All Ireland, North and South, is MIDI accredited. But for numbers of flocks scrapie monitored, somebody could tell me from GB, but I believe it's only about 220 flocks in all of GB that are scrapie monitored.
Yeah, it's no more than that. In our monitoring scheme.
Is there a register of those monitored flocks, Alison, that you can go and look?
Yes.
The same as MIDI.
Yes, absolutely. It's the exact same one, the membership database,
right?
psghs.co.uk. Most of them will be on there. As I said, some people won't give their permission, but yes, most of those will be on there. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I know some don't give their permission, but I don't think some understand either that it's another way of people checking what stock you might be going to buy in, or it's almost like a promotional tool to say,
Yes.
you know, go and check. But I don't think
Absolutely.
I think a lot
Yeah.
tick the not permission box and perhaps not realise that
Yeah.
they're doing themselves more harm
Yeah.
than good in a way, I think.
Absolutely. I think with the GDPR changes, we did send out a lot of, you know, emails asking people to sign up, and that did work. But we still, you know, yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think we need to really push the point that it is a promotional tool.
Yeah.
Good point, Helen.
The other thing I would just say is, literally before I come into this meeting, the Suffolk Sheep Society have obviously agreed to go ahead with the scrapie genotyping batch sort of system that they've literally just put their forms up on the website. So they're saying at a cost of £17.50 discounted cost. And I have gone back, you know, to how many sheep could each flock send in for £17.50. And to me, they've missed a bit out as well, because obviously you've got to pay for your vet to come and take the blood as well, haven't you? On top of that wouldn't be in the discounted cost for the genotyping.
No, I mean, what we're talking about is the actual cost of testing at the lab.
Yeah, so I don't think they've terribly explained it well on their thing. I'll go back to Robin, and I thought you were going to be in the meeting this afternoon, but they have literally launched it on their website within after the last 2 hours.
Yes, that doesn't surprise me. I did talk to Jill, and she was talking to them about it. So yeah, I just haven't spoken to Jill for the last couple of days. So I know that she has been talking to them about it.
Yeah, so it is out there. If anybody else on the call wants to go and look on the Suffolks, it should be there to see what, you know, they're doing, because they're obviously saying it's R1s or scrapie for their sales to go ahead this time, which is a good thing. So right, thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Helen. And thanks, Alison.
Okay.
Again, there's some questions, some clarifications, obviously, for us to look back at and answer some of these other questions that have been raised. So we will update as and when we get new information on that. So in the interest of time, I'll move on now to Marcus Bates, who's going to talk about export health certificates, etc. Over to you, Marcus.
Everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so just briefly to introduce myself and Rob and the organisations we're talking about. So we've got 2 organisations involved in exports and export certification and promotion. That's Export Certification Limited and UK Tag. So I chair the Export Certification Limited, and I'm also the Chief Executive of UK Tag. But on the grounds that I failed my sheep proficiency test in the 1970s, Rob Grinnal is our sheep industry representative, because he actually knows about sheep. And then my colleague Chris Jackson, he does most of the work for the UK Tag organisation. The point about these is they do two different jobs, but the 2 jobs have to work together for us to achieve our ambitions of actually exporting. So Export Certification Limited, that's the industry part of the UK Export Certification Partnership, UCESP. That's a partnership with DEFRA for us to work on the actual certification issues. And that's funded by industry contributions, AI centres, the NSA itself, levy boards, and individual companies all put, and breed societies, some breed societies put money into that. And we use that in order to do some of the work that DEFRA can't do, and support them. And then UK Tag is a different organisation. Again, that's a trade challenge partner accredited by the Department of International Trade. So the main focus there is working with DIT to deliver export promotion programs, and that's funded by DIT and the levy boards. So they're 2 different organisations, but we all know that if you want to get an export health certificate, you've got to actually stimulate some demand in the country that you want to export to. So the two things have to work together. And that's really a big challenge for us, because you're talking about two different government departments, and trying to pull those two things together can be quite challenging. But everything that Rob talks about will have some crossover in terms of some of it's done by Export Certification Limited, and some of it involves work from UK Tag. I'm going to hand over to him now and let him talk about what we've been doing and what we want to do in the coming years.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you. And thank you to the NSA for hosting this event. Compared with those people who've spoken before, I have to say my talk is going to be a lot drier, that's for certain, because there's a lot of practical usage stuff in the ones that we've had from Phil and Alison. And so, yeah, this is just a bit about what we're doing and how we can try and work together with you in breed societies as well. So I started with ECL in maybe 3 years ago now, and the role's been evolving and taking on more and more work all the time. And the amount of work, as Marcus has just alluded to, is huge, really, and it is ongoing all the time. And behind the scenes, often you don't see it, but it is trying to connect these different parties within our government and then in foreign governments back over to the UK as well. So it's quite long and convoluted, and although what I'm going to say today makes it sound like it should have just been easy because he listed 3 things, it's a lot of work that's ongoing. So recent work, we had, obviously there was work pre-Brexit, there was a great deal of work, and that's been involved. I've had that on other slides, but I've taken that off really because we've moved on. You know, we're looking at the things post-Brexit now. So live animal export came up at the start of the year, as Phil said, and ECL and UK Tag were involved in representing the industry on behalf of live animal exports for breeding stock. And I wrote to a number of the societies and asked for them to canvass members and get involved with that as well. So hopefully that was all very productive. We've heard that that you know this is useful stuff, and that hopefully breeding stock movements are going to continue with no issues. So that's a step in the right direction. Zootechnical we've discussed with Phil as well, and that was interesting how still that is so confusing, and that's something else that we've been involved with. Marcus has with Fanga as well. It affects the breeding societies and livestock and sales, and so we're trying to keep on top of that as much as we can. One of the things that perhaps wasn't made just that practically useful to Helen when she was asking was that some breed societies in the past, before they were zootechnically registered, were trying to sell livestock abroad to the EU, and the new societies in the EU were able to say, oh dear, you're not zootechnically registered, so we can't give you the price that you're asking for your livestock because they won't be truly registered in our pedigree system. And so by being zootechnically registered, you could actually say to them, well, look, we are fully registered, we're compliant with all of the EU legislation, so you haven't got any problems accepting us into your flock books or herd books if they were goats. And then again, most recently, and taking up a great deal of time, is export health certificate amendments. At time of Brexit and before Brexit dates, the Chief Veterinary Officer wrote to all of the countries with whom we have agreements and said, you know, we're going to change to be a third party, a third country, and so we're going to continue using the paperwork that we've been using, but without EU references. And of the, I think something like 200 or 150 countries that were contacted, I think there were 3 that actually got back and said, no, we're going to have to renegotiate. but that's something else that ECL is involved with, is taking out all the EU legislation from these documents and replacing it basically with the UK legislation. Thank you. Next slide, please. So export successes. ECL with their partners at UK Tag, with industry, with the semen and genetics centres, and our representatives, thanks to AHDB and NSA, have worked hard in other countries. So South America, huge amount of market for sheep from the UK in South America. Breeds like Dorsets and Hampshires, Texels are already taking that up. Argentina and Brazil have been fully negotiated, and there have been movements there already. Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile are nearing completion. When I tell you how big these markets are, we're talking about properties where there are 500 plus rams easily on a small one. So these places are looking for a huge amounts of input, and they're trying to improve their stock all the time. So there is market for us, and that's what we've been working towards. Australasia, obviously, we've now got significant trade working from the UK to New Zealand and Australia, with genetics moving out there. And then even just down to something as simple as unusual as Taiwan, where sheep and goat semen have now been accepted and negotiated. So to get to these actual positions, I should explain that we have to go through this sort of bilateral agreement system. So we are working with DEFRA and with the importing country's government, where we send out draft certificates from what we've produced in ECL, and then send them to the country looking to import, ask them if they will accept them, what extra reassurances they want in those documents. They'll then send them back. We'll redraft, send them to DEFRA to make sure that we can comply, and then it becomes a bit of a ping pong match. It's a to and fro where we're sending these things over until there's acceptance. And then that bilateral agreement is something that goes onto the government website on APHA Form Finder, where you'll find all of the agreements that are active and in use at this stage. Next slide, please. So current priorities for ECL. We've got an ambitious list of interested states. It is really huge. We're having regular discussions and webinars with South America. We're working to open Colombia, Mexico, Peru, Chile. It has taken a little bit of a stop at the moment because obviously South America is severely hit with COVID. In fact, our representative out there has been succumbed to it for quite some weeks now. She's very ill, but we are working hard on that. And these markets will be looking for our sheep and goats, that's for certain. There is no doubt about it. To give you some sort of idea, I had, sorry, bear with me here. We're looking at markets that will be between £500,000 and £1 million in value just for some of the South American markets. So we know that there is good work to be done in selling UK genetics out to these countries. Eastern Europe, we've got work in progress with Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Mongolia, Georgia, Turkey. I went out to Turkey 2 years ago now, to meet with their ministry, and there's a great deal of work that we can be doing there. We have a meeting tomorrow with them as well. They're one of the countries that have written back to say we need to just reword the documents, but that's what the work that we're involved with, and that should move along quite easily. India, another one, sheep and goats are wanted from the UK, particularly goats actually, in what could be a vast market for the UK livestock industry. Thank you. So considerations when opening markets, and again, this comes back very nicely to the things that we've discussed already. And that's down to the diseases that people or governments are concerned about. And scrapie hits the top of it. There is no doubt about it that when they're looking to buy from a country, they look at the scrapie status. So Australia and New Zealand have much more of an open market than we do. And then because they're scrapie free. So it's important that we continue with the monitoring scheme and the genotyping. There aren't very many flocks registered, that's for certain. And genotyping is expensive, and I'm welcome to what's been said from SAC about looking at these actual schemes and the costs, and anything we can do to keep that going is marvelous, because that is one of the major issues that stops in imports and exports from here. Infectious diseases, Mighty Visna, EAE, Schmallenberg, blue tongue, and TB all come into the different requirements. Some countries worry about them, others are not so bothered. They don't put them in their certificates. But these are all the diseases that we're trying to deal with when we're looking into these draft certificates. Thank you. Next slide. So just in closing, thank you again to the hosts for putting this on. If you have any queries that you would like to send through, my email address or phone number is there. We can try and help with any advice, or we're trying to draft certificates and agreements. That's what we're here for, and we're looking to keep this moving forward in opening up these new countries as much as we possibly can. There were a couple of queries I saw come up. Thank you. So Helen, do you have to be zootechnically registered to export genetics to Europe, USA, and Canada? So it's a sort of, it's still in this area we were talking about before. So USA and Canada will not require any zootechnical registration, so far as I'm aware. That's it. They will just have to comply with the export health certificates. And again, to Europe, that's the same sort of thing. If you're sending them to Europe as a commercial sheep, they wouldn't have to be zootechnically registered. But if you want them to go over and enter a flock book over there, they would. As you've already said, there isn't one. You are the only one. As far as I'm aware, and I'm happy for people to contradict me here, that wouldn't be an issue for you. Edward, yeah, export health certificate for Turkey. There is one for sheep semen to Turkey, but it has been put on hold by Turkey just at the moment. And this is just down to wording mainly, really, that they've said, well, you've left the EU, you've got to redesign the paperwork. And we have a meeting with them and the embassy there tomorrow when this will all be discussed and just try to finalize it. Actual livestock was started up prior, say 2018 when I went out there, and we're just still trying to work along at that, but Brexit got in the way of that, to be honest, and so it's just a little bit on hold. But certainly semen should be back up and running soon. So thank you there. Marcus, is there anything else you wanted to say from telling me where I've done it wrong?
No, thanks, Rob. That was very comprehensive. I just wanted to add a little bit about export promotion. Some of you I know on the call will have been to overseas trade shows before, such as Eurotier and so on. And obviously they're not happening at the moment, but we have been working very hard with DIT to try and persuade them to still continue putting in funding to these sort of programs. It's been a big challenge, and there's a significant difference between the way we've responded and the way, for example, the Australians have responded, who they've immediately put in more money into their export promotion programs because of COVID, whereas our government seems to have taken all the money away. Having said that, what we're trying to do is come up with what we've described as a sort of hybrid model for exhibiting. So we could use more online meetings and online interaction, but at some point people will still want to actually be together on a stand at a trade show in some form. And we're still in the process of developing that. We have been able to get some support from DIT. So we're building a new ambitious web platform that allows companies to exhibit there, and then that will also be used at trade shows. And we produced what we call a capability document, which I could share with you here briefly. Some of you may have seen this before. I hope you can see that, can you?
Yeah.
So this is part of a very large document about our capability in the United Kingdom for livestock breeding and genetics. And this is just the sector that covers the sheep industry. What we're looking to do now is digitize that and put it on a website and enable us to have case studies and company directories and so on. But also, we've managed to get some money to produce some videos. And so we're about to embark on that through the summer to produce these short videos for the different sectors. So it'd be very helpful for us to come up with some thoughts about, what are the key messages that we want to get across about our UK sheep industry in terms of breeding stock and genetics that we could put into a short 5-10 minute video. So I'll be talking to Phil and the NSA, who've been heavily involved in our export promotion programs, about exactly what it is we should be portraying for the sheep industry. And no doubt he will then suggest some of you and some of your farms where perhaps we could come and do some filming. But obviously it's so much time has to be spent chasing around to get the money. That's part of the problem. You spend an awful lot of the time battling to get the funding, and then of course you've then got to deliver something good at the end of it. But I think we still, we've made a lot of progress in South America thanks to the idea of bringing in money from AHDB and government, and actually employing consultants there to organise meetings and have a whole series of webinars and so on with different governments. And if we can use that model more, then let's hope we can use that to open up Russia, China particularly. NSA representatives have been out to a number of events there, and there's huge potential. But of course, they will be very concerned about scrapie. So Rob's point at the end there is key. New export markets are all going to be concerned about this. We've got to be able to have a good story to tell, and it's up to industry to work out how we're going to tell that story, I think. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, please do get in touch with Rob, and he will feed them back into us.
Thank you very much, Marcus and Rob. There are no specific questions that have come up on that I can see. Did anybody have any questions to raise? No hands. I can see.
Sean, if I could just for a second, just to come back on Marcus's point, because he's quite right. We have helped wherever we can in terms of any of these export missions. And Kevin Harrison, who's some of you will know, he's the chair of our English committee as well, has been out to China on a couple of occasions now and spoken at conferences and visited a few farms and all sorts. And the one thing that often strikes me from conversations I have with him is that it's not always, but sometimes there's his interest in after sales care as well. It's one thing selling genetics, but we've probably there's probably more in it for us if we can make sure that it works, that any genetics that are being sold actually work and do what they should be doing, and are being treated and kept in conditions where they do thrive. And that won't be for everyone, but it could be something for the future, that it's not just genetics that we sell, but it's research, advice, support, those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, Phil, I would add to that's exactly true, because we've looked at these countries that are asking for exports of embryos, let's say, for example, which is if they don't have the technical wherewithal to actually implant them successfully, then all that happens is we get a bad reputation for selling embryos that weren't working. Yeah, they weren't fertile, they weren't good enough. And so that's also important, that we're actually following that up and making sure that we're selling to countries where we can actually be successful, and the follow-up with that is great. And we've told the DIT that as well, that actually it's science that we're selling as well as just the genetics.
I would just like to endorse that comment. I've been to a few other countries and seen how they manage their sheep, and you know, it just UK sheep wouldn't live under the conditions that they were expecting to keep them. They need a management package as well as the sheep, or to go alongside the sheep.
Yes, I think you're right, Edward. There's huge potential there. In my experience, in the pig sector, we repopulated the not the US pig industry about 20-25 years ago, and supplied them with a whole new generation of high quality breeding stock. But shortly after that, we had to supply them with a whole generation of young British pig stockmen, because they didn't have anybody that knew how to look after pigs like this. You know, these are Rolls-Royce breeding animals, and they needed Rolls-Royce technicians. And I could see exactly the same sort of thing happening in China. Huge potential, masses of potential for sales of the breeding stock, but also for vets to go and teach them how to manage artificial insemination and embryo transfer, but also shepherds and flock managers and so on to go out and share expertise with them, and for them to come over here and learn from us. And that's the kind of long-term relationship that could become extremely profitable in the future. Same thing in India, and also possibly in South America.
Yes, I had seen sheep farms in Russia, and you know, it's just unbelievable how they expect it to work. They've just no expertise at all.
Okay, thanks for that, Edward. Any other questions? Anything else to discuss? I can see no more questions, so I'd like to thank speakers this afternoon, Alison, Rob, Marcus, and of course Phil, for the session. As I did say, there will be a link to the recording will be circulated to all attendees and affiliated breed societies on Monday. So for those people who are unable to join, they will be able to see this afternoon's sessions and this morning's sessions. So if there's no other questions, no other points to raise, again, I'd like to thank you all for joining this afternoon, and for some lively debates on some very important subjects, and wish you all the very best for the rest of your day. Okay.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.